wanted to be a doctor all my life. I was 5 years old and I was promising my grandma some longevity potion. The natural medicine direction came very easily to me. A huge chunk of my childhood was spent on our farm in South Africa, and much of the time I was out in we call it the veld, in the bush, with the cattle herders, learning about plants and about African native traditional medicine, which for the most part involves plants, also some of the minerals and rocks that they were using there. So even though as essentially a Westerner living in Africa, when you think about medicine, you mostly think about Western medical practice. The natural application came so easily to me, and when it was time for me to go from high school to university, a door just opened and I went to a 5-year homeopathic master's degree course. That's 5-year didactic with clinic training, and then a 6th year of research and writing a dissertation. So natural medicine just came easy to me and the doors opened when they needed to. Coming to the United States, I again found my way very easily into the naturopathic medical school. The course is structured very similarly to Western MD medical school, but with a greater emphasis on the nutritional focus from a diagnostic lifestyle perspective, but with the same coursework in terms of the anatomy, physiology, anatomical training, cadaver lab, etc. For me, it's chronic conditions that has a fatigue aspect to it. The chronic very clearly implies that when you have a chronic condition, your body has lost the capacity to self-heal. And for the most part in North America, it's not as a consequence of nutritional deficiencies. For the most part, it's as a consequence of having acquired obstacles to the body's natural self-healing mechanism, not being able to overcome the obstacles that you face. And thus you have a chronic condition. My passion lies with chronic fatigue and pain-associated conditions. The diagnostic words that are used is called chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic fatigue immune deficiency syndrome. In the rest of the world they call it ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, fibromyalgia, and then in the last decade or so it's been more commonly called Lyme disease or mold illness or CIRS, C-I-R-S. The challenge, and this is what really excites me, is from one case to the next of any given Western medical diagnostic word. For example, you can have 3, 4, 5 Lyme patients side by side. It's all different. So even though the label that everybody gets is the same label, once you start rolling up your sleeves and you dig into what does this person's timeline supports happened, and then you follow up with the indicated diagnostic tests and you find out that Lyme for one patient is an entirely different beast as compared to Lyme for the next patient. So it's very important to not just go on the superficial, great, I've got a Lyme, i.e. a bacterial infection, thus I need antibiotics. It's usually a constellation of many different etiological factors. And one of the most exciting things that actually really helps to drive results is that if you break the etiological factors down even further, the timeline is very helpful to help identify the triggering or eliciting etiologies. So for example, went on one fantastic fishing trip or outdoors adventure. I was really healthy, got a tick bite, got a bullseye rash, and I've been sick ever since. Or falling off a horse, bumping your head, never been well since. The other is once your system has gone into a decompensated state as a consequence of the infections, toxicities, mechanical trauma to the body, psycho-emotional is a huge impact. Grief, long-standing stress and worry, overwork, abuse. It is a disproportionately common and impactful triggering etiology in our patient base, unfortunately. But when the system does go into the chronic disease state, the system at the cell level, it overhauls the cell, and the cell changes the programs that it runs, and it goes from I'm healthy, I can thrive and consume energy, to we're in a dangerous place as a consequence of the infections, toxicities, inflammation, the mechanical changes, and the cell runs a survival program. These days it's commonly called the cell danger response, and it's fantastic. It prevents you from dying when there's handfuls of things wrong with the body, but it's not so easy to just gear out of the survival state back into thriving. And as a consequence of neglecting the detoxification and housekeeping regarding patching up areas of the cell that needs to be renewed, and also the cell revamps its energy production system and repurposes it toward the immune system. So you start making superoxides, which is really deleterious to the structure of the cell if that's not controlled within very, very tight margins. So what I'm getting at is that once the cell starts running the survival program, you acquire additional etiologies, and those are called maintaining etiologies, as a consequence of it's very clearly different from what triggers the person to get sick and blocks you from getting better. That process of surviving becomes part of the problem, because you acquire metabolic toxins, products of oxidative heavy metabolism, even toxic metals that would normally just pass through gets oxidized, and that accumulates in the body. And just simply because the body is in an energy crisis, or the body runs in an energy deficit, the consequences of not having a good police force, trash removal, repair and maintenance work, that catches up with you at some stage of the survival process, and you acquire these additional etiologies that is not apparent when you do a timeline analysis, and also it's not apparent when you do the normal analysis that you do through the common labs that we use in Western and integrated medicine. So digging into that piece is what really is a game changer for our patients, and that's also the exciting part for me, because that's where the investigative efforts really pay off. The most gratifying moment of my day, well, of the week, is when the analysis of patients' timeline, the laboratory analysis that helps direct us where to go with the therapeutic efforts, and you start doing enough of the therapy to affect physical, structural, which then at some stage begets functional change. When all of that comes together, that's the win, where we win as a clinic and a care team, and the patient wins because my agenda is their agenda, and when they start feeling better and they get their life back, so to speak, that's when we all win. And that's the most joyful part, when somebody that's been sick for a year, a decade, 3, 4 decades sometimes, when they start regaining the ability to perform their daily functions, and they get their life back and they get their dreams back, that's when we win. We believe in what our patients tell us, and as a consequence we follow up on the leads. We do the work to validate or rule out what folks are thinking is going on with them, is wrong with them. And as a consequence of doing thorough diagnostics, casting the net really wide, we're able to present our patients with diagnostics from the fields of immunology, infectious disease, chronic infections, environmental toxicity, and then also studying the structure of the cell, the mitochondria as the energy production part of the cell, the DNA as the library and essentially the gonads of the cell that drive cellular, not just multiplication, but cellular pivoting during a change in environmental requirements, a change of pH, temperature, change of season, change of diet, etc. And as a consequence of doing the work thoroughly and correctly for our patients, we present them with multiple puzzle pieces that creates that picture of course, this is why you're not feeling the way you should. And this is why you have a condition that, in spite of you taking very good care of yourself, you have not been able to overcome these various obstacles. Quite frankly, a lot of what keeps our patients from getting better is modern day, for a large part, man-made, industrial produced chemicals that dissolves into our bodies, and it obstructs the cellular machinery from functioning correctly. Now, we've just not been able to evolve the strategies, the enzyme systems, the detox pathways to rid the body of glyphosate, mercury, the other handfuls of pesticides, industrial chemicals and solvents, plastics and microplastics, plasticizing agents. Our bodies just simply do not have the capacity to effectively detox those chemicals. The fact that patients feel that there's hope once we are at the second visit, where we start reviewing the results of diagnostic testing, which is followed up by me presenting to them in just real clear terms, just good English. Here's what's been preventing you from healing all these years. I think that's what drives people hope. For the most part, every single data point that we present to people in the terms of laboratory test findings are action items for us. So it's not just tests that tell them what's wrong with them, but it also very clearly guides the way in terms of clinical action items, self-care, lifestyle action items that is implementable and that people can change their self-care, and day after day they can start helping themselves get better in addition to the treatment that we offer.